reporting from a health food store where the cashier will judge you for buying non-grass-fed butter like you committed a war crime. It's your host, Donovan.
Welcome back to Deep Dives in the Shallow End, where we wade through the swamp of societal expectations while hoping the leeches don't get us. But if I have learned one thing from history, I will probably sabotage myself well before the bloodsuckers get their chance. I'm Donovan, your not-so-expert guide through this lovely tapestry of human deception. Today we're diving into diet culture, more specifically the misleading, often downright predatory labeling practices of the so-called health food industry. So whip out your cruel-free, kale-crammed, low-cal carob chunks and let's peel back the shiny label to reveal what lies beneath. Spoiler alert, it's not health, it's marketing hype with a huge portion of self-loathing and a side of manipulation.
Deep dives in the shallow end. Deep dives in the shallow end.
Alright, let's get down to brass tacks. Diet culture is the monster that lurks in the dark corners of our collective psyche, the same one that houses the bathroom scale. And the food industry? Well, it's the mad scientist feeding that monster slabs of raw meat labeled low carb while cackling into a black void. You know, just as you do when inventing new ways to sell 90-calorie packs of garbage and inner disdain. But let's rewind a little, shall we? Let's start with the basics, the so-called diet foods. It's 1960. Post-war America, where smoking is considered a national sport, where grandma was in a dead heat for gold right there with her cardiologist. Valium and aspic tins were a loving mother's closest friends. Eating fat is public enemy number one. Luckily, the main diet of a housewife consisted of diet pills, 8 cups of black coffee, and a pack of Chesterfields. That'll keep the frame nice and slim and the blood pressure cranked up to a healthy 11. Enter the first big diet fad, low fat. The concept that if you just remove the fat, everything else becomes magically healthy. Never mind that removing the fat also removed the taste, the satiety, and anything else remotely enjoyable about food. Turns out that fat, despite its ability to sound indulgent, was never the villain. A 2015 study published by Harvard School of Public Health found that, contrary to the promises of the low-fat craze, reducing fat in processed foods often meant increasing sugar, leading to more obesity and metabolic disease. Kind of like me making grand promises to my wife in high school about our bright future. 20 years later, the sweet life is a sugar-coated heap of disappointment. Turns out, I'm just more obese, and metabolic disease got its revenge. But our good friends in food marketing thought, hey, how can we make this vaguely food-shaped piece of packing styrofoam taste like food, but mark it up like it's made of gold dust? Enter things like low-fat cookies. Tasteless, gritty circles of pure frustration filled with sugar that spikes your insulin like it's trying to put you into a diabetic coma. Sugar doesn't ask for much in return, just your sleep, your energy levels, and maybe a foot or two by the time you're 60. Fast forward to the 90s, fat was no longer quite the villain it had once been. Rather, carbs were the next devil incarnate. Suddenly, Atkins and other low-carb messiahs convinced people that carbohydrates were not a food group but a weapon, a soft, squishy missile aimed directly at your thighs. In the early 2000s, the Atkins diet became so popular that roughly 10% of Americans were attempting it at its height. Much like Pauly Shore's career by this point, carbs were out, and we all started celebrating the wonders of Paris Hilton and bacon. It was like a reverse fat-free revolution. Everyone turned on bread faster than Quisling turned on Oslo and embraced the meat sweats like a new religion. The low-carb diet was all about pitting protein against bread, and folks, protein won. Feasts were held in the name of cold cuts while bread was cast to the pillory stuck with a heretic's fork. The only thing this diet fad didn't tell you was that cholesterol was invited to the feast, the kind of feast that might end in an angioplasty. A 2013 meta-analysis in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition highlighted that extreme low-carb diets, while effective in the short term for weight loss, were linked to increased cholesterol and cardiovascular risks in the long run. But you'll have to pry those delicious, greasy organ meats from my cold, dead hands. And at this rate, it may not be long. But it wasn't just bread that got demonized. Pasta, potatoes, anything remotely comforting became the dietary equivalent of leprosy. Although historically, that just meant a one-way trip to Hawaii, so honestly, sign me up. Meanwhile, we were shoveling down cheese-covered bacon and washing it all down with Diet Coke. Look, if Diet Dr. Pepper is 99% water, then technically I'm more hydrated than Gunga Din on a slip and slide. But try explaining that logic to my wife, who looks at my 12-pack stash like it's poisoned Kool-Aid. Drink more water. You can't live on diet soda. But like the health guru W.C. Fields once said, water, never touch the stuff. Anyway, moving on. Who could forget gluten-free? Ah yes, gluten. That terrifying molecule lurking in your grandmother's braided challah recipe that somehow became the Grim Reaper's right-hand man by 2005. For 1% of the population, the ones with actual celiac disease, going gluten-free is necessary for survival. But here's the thing. The gluten-free market exploded into a $23 billion industry by 2020, according to a report by Grandview Research, despite only 1% of the population having celiac disease, as mentioned before. For the rest of us, it's just another excuse to throw $8 at a loaf of bread that tastes like a yoga mat and crumbles like a sandcastle facing high tide. But hey, the package says gluten-free, has a leaf on it, so clearly it must be a cure to cancer, right? Wrong. Also, newsflash, potato chips are gluten-free too, but that doesn't mean you should use them as the foundation for a balanced diet. Like I tell my kids, do as I say, not as I do, because some of us still have the chance at growing up without a dietitian's intervention and daily stomach injections. And while we're at it, let's be real. Most of those gluten-free substitutes have more chemicals than off-brand hairspray, but at least you can pretend you're clean eating while you drain your kids' college fund to keep stocked up on Ghost Fish Hazy IPA to wash down your Udi's pizza. Those are all gluten-free. Let's talk about deceptive labeling, because this is where diet culture really shines, like a laser pointer used to distract a cat. The term natural is perhaps one of the best marketing ploys ever invented. Imagine a boardroom full of food execs brainstorming how to make crushed up corn taste good. One bright-eyed caffeine-fueled junior exec says, "What if we call it natural?" A hush falls over the room. Natural. Yes, because anything natural must be good for you. With the exception of things like cyanide, asbestos, botulism, mercury, formaldehyde, and about 10,000 other things we could mention. Still, the term worked like Iago whispering sweet lies in Othello's ear to make consumers think they're buying something virtuous rather than processed gunk rolled into a more authentic shape. It's all about illusion, after all. And while natural has no real definition under FDA guidelines, approximately 60% of consumers are more likely to buy a product labeled natural, according to a survey by Consumer Reports National Research Center. It has the undeniable power to trick you into feeling morally superior for buying overpriced cereal. It's the intellectual equivalent to making Shakespearean allusions that I had to look up. Low calorie is another favorite label. Take a closer look, and you might realize that yes, it's low calorie, but it's also only 2 servings the size of a thimble wrapped up to look like a substantial meal, like airplane food, theater snacks, or a cod piece. Impressive at first, but disappointingly hollow. At least when I tried. They're essentially giving you a solitary crouton and calling it dinner. But at least you're dieting, so congrats on fighting that appetite into submission while eating what can only be described as the culinary equivalent of a bad date. Disappointing, unsatisfying, and leaving you wishing you had just stayed in bed. And let's not forget how they often pull the old switcheroo, calling something low-calorie while conveniently neglecting to mention that they also replace real ingredients with synthetic sweeteners that taste like saccharine sadness lovingly dusted with carcinogens. Oh, and speaking of fakery, let's chat about processed meats. Chicken nuggets. Those nostalgic little bites of chemically reconstructed bird parts. Ever wonder why every single nugget from every single brand tastes eerily similar? It's because they're all playing by the same twisted rule book, standardized flavor profiles. If you think the chicken in your nuggets has anything to do with the chickens frolicking in idyllic farms pictured on the label, think again. The flavor isn't chicken so much as it is economically viable chicken-esque substitute. Real chickens, they were involved somewhere, probably. They might even have been clucking once, but after being treated with flavor enhancers, transglutaminase, aka meat glue, and anything else to make the texture and taste feel somewhat recognizable, it's a far cry from anything Mother Nature intended. It's like push-up garments and Spanx. It's packaged to look much better, but once you've looked under the hood, you come to find out you've actually been hoodwinked. Essentially, they've given us a culinary Frankenstein, stitched together with food glue and held up by sheer corporate willpower. Delicious, isn't it? And the answer to that is regrettably and overwhelmingly a heartfelt yes. Oh man, just mix them with some of that sweet Baby Ray's barbecue sauce and it is blast-off time. But it's fine. I'm pretty sure the sauce is natural, after all. And don't think the absurdity stops there. The processed food industry loves a good secret, especially when it comes to flavoring. Imagine the scene, a lab full of people in white coats sweating under fluorescent lights, tasked with making cheese puffs taste like actual cheese despite no cow, goat, or buffalo ever having been involved at any point. It's like watching someone pull a rabbit out of a hat, except it's actually a dead pigeon with some fur and rabbit ears grotesquely stapled to it, but with a slightly more palatable appeal. You want strawberry-flavored ice cream? Sure, but real strawberries are too expensive and too inconsistent, so instead we get strawberry flavor, concocted from chemicals that can pull double duty, adding flavor to your yogurt and cleaning gym locker room benches. But honestly, diet culture and these deceptive labels are the equivalent of a toddler covering their eyes and thinking you can't see them. The illusion of health is what sells, not actual health. Because real health, as you probably know, doesn't come prepackaged, it doesn't have a leaf on the label, and it doesn't promise you'll lose 10 pounds in a week if you simply replace all your meals with seaweed-infused miracle broth. Real health is boring. It's eating your vegetables, avoiding too much sugar, and walking more often. Not the kind of stuff that fits nicely on the front of a shiny, colorful box. Again, do as I say, not as I do. The more we dig into diet culture, the more we realize that it's not just about what we're eating, but how we're being manipulated into thinking that health is something you can buy off a shelf. Diet culture thrives on deception, like me filling out my taxes. The labels are designed not just to mislead, but to exploit the insecurities drilled into us by years of being told we're not enough. Not thin enough, not fit enough, not disciplined enough. Sounds like the lectures old Ma used to drill into my head as she chased me around the house with a belt. They know this, and they know exactly how to market us a false sense of achievement. When you buy that gluten-free, low-carb, fat-free, low-sodium, sugar-free bar of trash, you're not just buying food. You're buying absolution, however temporary and unsatisfying it might be. Like me giving my confession after having cursed out yet another drive-thru worker because making my fries well done is akin to the Tet offensive but without even a Pyrrhic victory. And don't get me started on keto-friendly packaged foods. It's like someone took the original low-carb craze, slapped a few more buzzwords on it, and sold it back to us at twice the price. There's keto chips, keto cookies, keto ice cream. You name it, they found a way to ketofy it. But here's the kicker. Most of those products are so full of sugar alcohols and artificial additives that your digestive system will be screaming uncle by the end of the day. A study in BMC gastroenterology found that 30% of individuals consuming more than 20 grams of sugar alcohols a day reported bloating, gas, and other digestive discomforts, something they don't advertise next to the keto-friendly label. But sure, it's healthy, so who cares if your stomach sounds and feels like a malfunctioning garbage disposal? So next time you find yourself staring at the aisle of organic, low-fat, diet-certified, gluten-free, guilt-reduced, edible cardboard products, just remember, you're not actually buying health. You're buying a story the diet industry wrote, set, and cast you in as the underpaid, overcriticized sucker of a main character. They've crafted a narrative that makes you believe health is something you can attain if you just buy the right products, follow the right rules, and suffer enough to earn it. And when that story doesn't pan out, guess what? They're more than happy to sell you the sequel. The next new product, the next diet book, the next miracle pill. It's a never-ending cycle of exploitation. Like when Sisyphus got the boulder to the top of the hill only to find a sterile corporate email letting him know that he's not meeting expectations. And let me tell you, I am also a sucker cast in that straight-to-DVD B-horror film of a situation right alongside many of you listening. So these harsh messages are just as applicable to me as to anyone.
Deep eyes in the shadow and...
So how do we break free from this cycle? Here are a few steps you can take to empower yourself and promote real health. Number 1, actually read the label. And I don't mean the front of the package with its pretty pictures of dancing vegetables and promises of eternal youth. Flip that bad boy over and read the ingredients. If it sounds like your high school chemistry teacher had a stroke while naming compounds, maybe put it back on the shelf. Number 2, support companies that aren't complete sociopaths. Look, I know it's hard to find food companies that aren't trying to gaslight us harder than my ex, and my current for that matter, but they do exist. Some brands actually tell you what's in their products without trying to convince you that their sugar-laden granola bar will give you enlightenment. Number 3, buy real food. You know, the stuff that doesn't need a marketing team or legal department to explain what it is. A carrot is just a carrot. It's not naturally optimized root nutrition or earth-harvested beta-carotene delivery systems, although I wonder if I could pitch that to the boys down at Big Carrot. Anyway, number 4, watch out for sneaky additives. The term natural flavors is about as honest as my dating profile, which my wife really resented proofreading for me. And those sugar alcohols, let's just say your bathroom will become your new home office if you overdo it. Do your research, or don't. I'm not your mother. Though she'd probably tell you the same thing right after reminding you about your posture and asking why you're still disappointing her. Or perhaps I'm just projecting. And finally, number 5, raise a little hell. Write to your representatives about better food regulations. Call out companies on their BS. Make a little noise. Sure, you might feel like you're screaming into the void, but hey, at least you're screaming. And sometimes, if enough of us scream together, something actually changes. Or we all just lose our voices. Either way, it's therapeutic. Remember, folks, the food industry is like that friend who keeps trying to sell you essential oils on Facebook. They don't actually care about your well-being. They just want your money and your dignity. The best we can do is try to be slightly more aware of how we're being manipulated while we continue to make questionable dietary choices. Until next time, keep questioning everything, especially those serving size suggestions, because apparently half a cookie is supposed to be enough for a grown adult. And, as always, take care of yourselves and others, but far more importantly, remember to hit like and subscribe, and I hope you'll join me on the next episode of Deep Dives in the Shallow End.
Be by the shallow end. Lord, about